Hello, everyone. My name's Alan Dick, and on behalf of my fellow CommerceNext co-founders, Scott Silverman and Veronica Sonsev, I want to welcome you to today's webinar. Today is Wednesday, June 2nd, 2021, and our topic this week is Experiential Ecommerce, the key to winning the new digital consumer. Before we go any further, I want to welcome all of our speakers today. Sucharita Kodali, she's the Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester Research. Natalie Brown is the Head of Marketing at Sur La Table. Jacob Roque is the VP of Direct Consumer at the Collected Group. From Showfields, Katie Hunt, their CEO and co-founder. And finally, from Bloomreach, we have Raj De Datta, the CEO and co-founder. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. It's always a blast having you guys here. I also want to thank our webinar sponsor, Bloomreach. Thank you so much, guys, for sponsoring it today, making it possible. Also want to thank our gifting sponsor, Gift Now. 5 lucky live attendees will receive a gift of their choice. Sorry, replay listeners. We'll just draw those names just after the webinar ends today, and we'll let the winners be notified by email. And of course, our audience for joining us today. Today's agenda, it's packed. We're going to have a sneak peek at next week's webinar. We're going to find some more places where you can connect with CommerceNext content, a couple of housekeeping notes so you get the most out of this webinar. But then we're going to move to Sucharita and Raj having a one-on-one discussion about the new Digitalseeker and what that means for experiential e-commerce. We're going to have a couple of audience polls. And at the bottom of the hour, we're going to go to the panel discussion. We'll take some audience Q&A. It'll be great. All right, starting off next week to celebrate Pride Month, we're going to be talking about LGBTQ issues in e-commerce in the workplace. Kate Delhagen from Oregon Sports Angels is going to be leading that discussion. We'll have representatives from Shutterfly, Bombas, Estee Lauder, and L'Oreal there to talk about that. CommerceNext is also available on YouTube. We have over 100 videos available from all of the content we've produced, including this one that's showing Jason, the retail geek Goldberg, talking about the post-pandemic consumer and what you can expect in the next year. Excellent talk. Highly recommend you take a look at that. All of that's available at youtube.com/CommerceNext. And brand spanking new, the CommerceNext podcast drops next week. So we're going to have, it's a different style of format for us. We're going to have some career advice and marketing strategy shared by e-commerce and digital marketing leaders. Episodes are going to be every other week. And next week, we have Joe Medjibo, the CEO of Purple, joining us. So that'll be fantastic. All right, let's help you get the most out of this. Don't worry about missing anything. We're recording this webinar. We'll make it available to everyone by tomorrow afternoon. And let me show you where a couple of things are on your screen. If you take a look in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see some buttons up there. Those include chat, and you use that when you want to comment on the webinar, you want to tell us where you're calling in from, congratulate the speakers, or chat with each other. We also have a Q&A button. If you've got questions for the speakers, really appreciate if you put them in there, because what that allows us to do is it allows us to see you guys upvoting it. Every time you upvote a question, it signals to us that it's important to you, and we can prioritize the ones that have the most upvotes. In either way, you enter that at the bottom right of your screen. All we ask is that you don't be self-promotional and you be respectful to everyone else. All right. So without much further ado, I'd like to bring up Sucharita Kodali and Raj De Datta. Hey, how are you guys doing today?
Hey, Alan. Great to see you. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Alan. Hi, Raj.
It's great having you guys here. Before we begin, before I take off here, I just want to remind everyone that Raj is also the author of the just released book, The Digitalseeker, a guide for teams to build winning experiences. We thought it would be more useful today to open it with Raj and Sucharita having a discussion about this and kind of framing our panel discussion instead of having a regular presentation. So with that, I will turn it over to you two, and I'll see you in about 20 minutes or so.
Well, Raj, thank you so much for being here today, and congratulations on your new book. It is awesome. I was lucky enough to get an advance copy and am excited to talk to you about it today.
Well, thanks, Sucharita. It's been a pleasure to write the book, and I'm excited to hear what you think and what others think.
So my first question, you are the founder and CEO of Bloomreach. You're an angel investor. You have a family, and you wrote this book. How did you find time? I guess you just don't sleep.
Well, I had a lot of help. Let me start there. But nights and weekends are definitely the right time to write. I did learn that context switching between sort of work and writing is not that easy. That you really have to reserve time to put your mind in a place where you can write. But I enjoyed it. It was fortunate that it was on a topic that I know and love, and so it was a pleasure to write.
Yeah, I agree. Writing is really, really hard to compartmentalize and, kind of just to jump in for 5 minutes. It's not like, making a change in an Excel spreadsheet or something. So what inspired you? Tell us about the inspiration for the Digitalseeker. What do you think hadn't been told in the retail world before, that we hadn't read in any of the previous literature that's out there, or hadn't heard at a conference before?
Yeah. So, the question that I kept getting asked, and we at Bloomreach have had the good fortune of working with 750 of the largest and most successful brands in the world, and powering almost a quarter of e-commerce in some way on the Bloomreach platform. And so I'd get asked this question, whether because of that or my seed investing in Silicon Valley: what makes the winners win? And why do the losers lose in digital? And what can you tell us about that? And so after giving a few board presentations about this topic, I said, look, before drinking my own Kool-Aid, I'm going to go do some research myself. And this process well. And I had the opportunity to speak to lots of our customers, their executives, practitioners. And after about, 80 or 100, interviews, the thing I felt is that in many ways, we were taking a very incremental approach to thinking about digital and e-commerce, and making the small tweaks that take us from offline to online. And so, the central thesis of the book, which we'll, I'm sure, talk about, is this idea of the seeker, and this idea that, you win big in digital if you build the experiences, and if you build your entire business around the seeker, not the customer, which is much more than a euphemism. And as we talk about all the different ways of understanding the customer, I'm sure we'll talk about the seeker. But I really found that the standout digital experiences are really deeply built for the seeker and not the customer. And that formed the basis to inspire me to write this book and try to make it as practical as possible.
Right. So let's talk a bit about the seeker. That's, of course, the title of the book. And I thought it was really interesting that you make that distinction between customer-centric versus seeker-centric, because I think a lot of our listeners today probably see themselves as customer-centric. Now, I don't think that you're saying that one shouldn't be customer-centric, but kind of it's important to also be a digital seeker, or to be seeker centric. So talk a little bit about the differences between those two. You had a great chart in the book that could be kind of a good thing to pull from.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, maybe just a story to frame what is the difference? What are we really talking about here? I think, great e-commerce experiences like Amazon have really trained us in many ways to do the work. We used to pick up the phone and call a travel agent and say, I'm booking a vacation. Now what we do is the work is done by the consumer, the work to go say, what car rental company, what flight, what excursions, what hotel reservations should I make? So in many ways, the web has been built as a transactional entity on the assumption that people know what they're looking for, go there and make a purchase. And it's great for that purpose. And Amazon is trained as well to do that. But of course, that transfers the work to the consumer. And so you're ultimately a consumer, or you're a customer of a car rental company, of a flight, of a tour excursion, but you're really a seeker of a memorable family vacation. And so the seeker is the why behind the customer. In many ways, we translate our goals, our whys, into a series of potential purchases for which we become customers. And so it's not about not being customer-centric not being important. It's about going deeper behind the customer to question the motivations, and then building digital experiences that encompass that in much the same way full service offline retailers used to do before. But in a digital world, we made it very transactional in many cases. And our view is that in the next 20 years, the winners are going to go beyond that and be much more seeker-centric in their thinking.
Yeah. One of the distinctions I liked in the book was the straight up answering. They answer different questions. When one is customer centric, it seems like it's more about how do I serve this customer, versus seeker centric is more about asking what is that underlying need. And so my question to you, Raj, is to get to that why. There have been frameworks and methodologies that have become fairly popular in retail for sure. I mean, certainly design thinking. A lot of CPGs will ask like their 5 whys, like why, why do you like this? Why do you like that? Kind of to get to those underlying needs. How is this different? Or, kind of are those perfectly legitimate methodologies to get to the seeker-centric mentality?
So first and foremost, I think they are perfectly legitimate methodologies. Really, those are processes one goes through, or methodologies one goes through to understand who the seeker is and why they might be interested in your products. But I think the profound realization, from the book is that seeker centricity is not just a research methodology to understand the motivation of the customer. You actually have to translate that into the end-to-end business model, to the org structure of your company, to what you end up building, to how you seek feedback on that. It's really about reinventing your business. It starts with the understanding of the seeker, but it's reinventing the business around the seeker that actually makes a seeker-centric experience, come true. And to use an example of one of the examples in the book, when Hotel Tonight, which is sort of serendipitous travel, came about, of course, they went to the seeker to say, hey, spontaneous travel is a deep need. And so they may have used design thinking or some other method. They probably also used a lot of data science, because these days you can go beyond surveys and interviews to listen to the data to figure that out. But having understood the seeker, they also then said, well, we need a business model to support that. So let's go to all the hotel chains, figure out what free inventory is, and then make that available to then enable travelers to go book on demand. So there was the supply side of the equation and a reinvention of the business model that accompanied the seeker centricity, and that's what made the business work end to end digitally. So it's much more about translating the methodology, identifying the seeker, adding the technology, adding the org, adding the business model, and building the end-to-end framework for a world-class digital business.
So obviously, Bloomreach is a technology company, and you have invested in a number of tech solutions. And technology, as you just alluded to, is a significant part of the book and how companies can get themselves to that seeker-centric mindset. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting was you lay out a framework for the tenets of digital experience. And one of those tenets was explainability, particularly in AI. And I just want to ask you to talk a little bit about that and, just elaborate on why it's so important, what it means, first of all, and why it's so important.
Well, we started Bloomreach really very much with an AI thesis, and AI is one of what in the book we call the 3 A's, which are the enablers of seeker centricity: ambient technologies, APIs, and AI. And AI is the piece of it that makes sense of all the patterns. Having understood all the different interaction points with the seeker, you got to distill insight from that, and then ultimately take action. And so increasingly AI technology, if you follow neural networks and deep learning and all the modern techniques around AI, the cool thing is they're really powerful. The bad thing is they're increasingly difficult for a human being to explain. And that has a series of challenges that make it really difficult. To use an extreme case, if the AI is denying your credit card and you can't explain to that customer why they were denied, well, that's actually a regulatory risk for a financial services institution in that process. And there may not be degrees that are quite at that point, but you can think about the healthcare examples and x-rays, and you can even think about simple shopping examples where you're ultimately recommended a product and you're like, that's weird. Why am I being recommended this product? And it goes to the heart of what makes AI successful, which is trust. And so if you cannot explain how and why the AI is making a decision, it creates serious trust breakdowns with potential customers.
So talk a little bit more about that, because there seems to be such a push toward deep learning frameworks and, kind of machines just taking over. Doesn't this, it seems like something like this, which I agree with you. I think it's incredibly important. Certainly as a consumer, I would like that. But, it seems like there's tension between what we want as consumers and what the potential of technology could be. Do you see the same tension? Or do you think that is it fairly, it's two sides of the same coin, or something else?
No doubt. I mean, and there is innovation. Fortunately, there's innovation going on in explainability in the same way as there's innovation going on in neural networks and deep learning. And it's essential that one is they're the other sides of the same coin. Now, I think what I would tell practitioners is if you're using AI, it's almost impossible to one for one say, because of this factor, you got this outcome in this very deterministic fashion. But what you can say is, these are the factors that influence the decision. And that level of technology exists. And so what I would say you should be demanding from your data scientists and your AI models is, look, you got to at least give me the contributing factors. It's possible to instrument to do so. So I can explain to my boss in the form of in my analytics tools or on my website why exactly this decision is being made.
So one of the things that I really liked about the book is just the richness of case studies that you had. And you had so many fun ones. You had, Cedar Point and the United States Tennis Association and, just a variety of different businesses. I think you had like the health system of the UK. Which one stands out the most to you, Raj?
Yeah, there are, of course, the classic Silicon Valley examples, right? Which Airbnb and Uber and Peloton and so on and so forth. But the ones that stand out to me are the ones that show the level of innovation that businesses or organizations that you would least expect are employing around the seeker-centric mindset. And so I think the one I'll use a sports example, which is a European soccer team called Bayern Munich that I like a lot. And Bayern Munich is a soccer club. So, not on the vanguard of technology is what you would say. And what the folks at Bayern Munich ultimately, which is a German soccer team and based in Munich, and what they found is they had really passionate fans. And so, most sports organizations would say, how do I cater to the fan base? What Bayern Munich understood with the seeker-centric mindset is that really the customer may be somebody buying a ticket to the game, but the seeker is really seeking to live the fan experience and be one with the players and feel a sense of camaraderie as if they're almost on the field, no matter whether they're in New York or whether they're in Munich. And so they understood that, built themselves almost like a media company. Today make as much money almost through a media business model as they do selling tickets to soccer games. Built these highly immersive experiences using AR technology so that you can be in New York, log into the platform, play soccer with your favorite players, be at the game as if you're at Allianz Stadium, purchase jerseys to create a business model around e-commerce. And today, if you ask yourself, what is Bayern Munich? You almost can't define it as a soccer team anymore. It's almost a media empire. And that's when you've reached full seeker centricity, is your entire business has been reinvented around a new idea.
That's interesting, and that's a great example, and I enjoyed reading that in the book as well. Now, one of the areas that I would argue they're probably the areas in retail where they're a little bit less evolved, and I think that they have an opportunity to be more seeker-centric is certainly in the grocery world and in the CPG world. I would describe that. You use an expression in the book. You call it the Brochure Era. Where the website is just basically, it's really rudimentary and it's just, kind of the nutritional information, kind of ported online. There's not really much more than that. Do you see even those sectors eventually evolving and embracing, kind of digital in a different way?
So grocery, I think, is a fantastic story as a result of the pandemic. I mean, if there's one subsector of retail that I think will be most profoundly changed by the pandemic, it's grocery, because its penetration digitally was so low. And if I look at a Bloomreach customer like Albertsons, which owns Safeway, what they saw last year was 500% growth. And so the recurring investments that they're making in digital have been so massively accelerated that I think it's going to profoundly change the space. And so absolutely, I think if I take grocery as an example, just putting the person at the center of the grocery experience, understanding the recurring nature of grocery shopping in general, understanding the connection between the ingredients and the cooking. There's so many great opportunities to reinvent grocery. So I think it's a great opportunity. And I think on the CPG side, really the threat of all these DTC businesses coming online, the classic stories of Harry's or other such brands that come about, Warby Parker, those are causing CPG companies to wake up in a way that I've never seen before, much faster than ever before. So I think great things happening on both of those axes.
Yeah. And so you just mentioned DTC, and I was curious, that was going to be my follow-up question to that. And one of the other, one of the things that actually Forrester has done with Bloomreach is that we just released a study of consumers and brands on their digital, what do consumers want? What do, what are businesses providing and investing in? And from that research, DTC absolutely seemed to be a trend. And I just wanted to ask you from your own experience at Bloomreach, is that something that you're actually seeing brands embrace? And what's been the impact of that evolution?
I think we're seeing it in a big way. Now, I think the volumes are still smaller than you tend to see in classical retail, because of course, retailers start with customers, and most DTC brands don't start with customers. They start with a great brand, but they don't have the kind of direct relationship that enables them to kind of get going. But that's changing really fast. One of the pillars of Bloomreach's business is a customer data platform and engagement, platform through the acquisition of a company called Exponia. And DTC brands are among the fastest adopters of that platform, which means they're starting to understand customers, build profiles, get to the heart of what those customers are seeking, and market to them in highly personalized ways. So I think we see DTC as a huge trend. Increasingly, in many ways, I think the lines between retail and DTC are blurring. I believe, and certainly interested in your point of view on this, that the retailer of the future is in many ways either a marketplace or a brand or both.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would argue, to your earlier point about DTC still being relatively small, it's also been in large part because brands have been so concerned about channel conflict, and they haven't really invested fully in it. I mean, if I were to do an audit of every box of a brand that I have, very few of them even have their URLs on their packaging. And it reminds me of the year 2000, when retailers wouldn't, even tell their customers they had a website. So it's,
right.
We're still very much in the early days for sure. Now, I know that we are going to switch over to the panel shortly, but I have one last question for you, Raj, and that is that we spent a lot of time talking about B2C companies, but of course, the idea of the Digitalseeker applies to B2B as well. So can you talk a little bit about what you learned in your research about how it applies to B2B, and kind of what are some of the insights that you gleaned in your exploration?
Well, B2B commerce, I think, and seeker-centricity in B2B commerce is a super interesting topic, I think. And what makes B2B different than B2C is, of course, that it's a multi-headed hydra, in the sense that it's not one consumer. It might be an individual who's a technician. It might be the design engineer who might be designing the parts for an elevator or a car. It might be the procurement person who's ultimately making the purchase. So you've got multiple, consumers behind whom you've got multiple seekers. And so designing an experience for them is incredibly complicated, but incredibly rewarding when you do it right. And to use an example of one of the ones that we work with in the air conditioning supply business, they're really thinking about each of these personas individually, and then building a seeker-centric experience that encompasses each of them individually, and then coming together to receive these highly personalized experiences. And so B2B commerce being reinvented with this framework, I think, is a great opportunity.
That's great. That's great. Well, with that, I will hand the virtual mic back over to Alan. Dick, thank you so much, Raj, for joining us today. And I encourage everybody to get their copy of the Digitalseeker. It's a great framework for you as you think about your own digital journeys in 2021 and beyond.
Thank you, Sucharita.
Thank you so much, Sucharita, for coming on and doing the interview for us and pondering those questions. I really do appreciate it. We really thank you for being here. And I guess we will see you on our next webinar then, Sucharita. Raj, we're going to take you off screen here for just a second, but we'll definitely be bringing you back at the bottom of the hour. All right, so let me just take a moment to remind everyone that you can request a free, no obligation copy of Raj's book. If you missed a chance to do that and order it online when you registered for the webinar, just email the address below and they'll make certain that you get a copy of his book. Okay, let me just remind folks that have just joined how you can participate. Please feel free to ask as many questions as you want using the Q&A field. We just ask that you make certain that you are respectful and non-promotional. And if you see a question there you like, make certain you upvote it. This is a great chance to talk to some fabulous retailers about what they're doing. And we certainly hope you take advantage of it. It's always fun getting your questions in. All right, it's instant poll time. Veteran viewers know what we do here. All right, so question number one. We asked this last week. We're just going to take a comparison here. Which, if any, of the following technologies have you enabled on your site? You can select all that apply, and we'll give you a couple of seconds to do it. Visual search, AI-powered personalization, chatbots, virtual assistants, 3D product images, augmented reality, virtual reality, or something else. And if you have something else in there, make certain you drop in the chat what you guys are working on. So the question on the table, which, if any, of the following technologies have you enabled on your site? Select all that apply. Looks like chatbots and virtual assistants are taking the lead here at 33%. 3D product images and AI-powered personalization are coming in at 20%. That's about what we saw last week. Chatbots definitely took the lead last week, but I definitely see more folks doing the 3D product images this time around. All right, let's close that one out. We'll finish that with chatbots and virtual assistants being 37%. Perfect. Let's move to the next one. This is a tough one. Question number two. Do you believe that your company embraces the digital seeker consumer? You got two answers, yes or no. Let's see what we say. Do you believe that your company embraces the digital seeker consumer that Raj and Sucharita were discussing? Yes or no? Now this I wasn't expecting. Hold on. I'm getting some negativity here. It's about 60% no and 40% yes. Although yeses are climbing. We're almost at a dead heat right now. Yeah, it's about 50-50 right now, with no's just edging out the yeses. Very interesting. It's now even. All right, that's very interesting. I was really suspecting that folks would have a more embracing view of this, but yeah, 50-50. All right, let's end that one. And we always do a question for the next webinar in our series next week. We're celebrating Pride Month with a webinar on LGBTQ issues in the e-commerce and the workplace. This is going to be led not by one of us, but by Keitel Hagen, a good friend of ours and the founder of Oregon Sports Angels. And we have a quick question for you there. How would you describe your company's support of LGBTQ plus team members and the LGBTQ plus community overall? I knew I wasn't going to get through that without stumbling on it. Are you fully supportive with robust programs? Somewhat supportive with a program or two in place? Getting started, or is it not a priority? How would you describe your company's support of LGBTQ plus team members and the community overall? Fully supportive, somewhat supportive, getting started, or not a priority? So fully supportive, coming in at around about a quarter of you. Somewhat supportive, around a third. Getting started is 19%. Not a priority is 22%. So definitely over half of you are fully supportive or somewhat supportive with programs in place. And another 25% are getting started. All right, let's close that one out. And now, let's welcome our panelists. All right. Hey, everyone. Nice to see everyone today. Thank you so much for joining. Let's start with a round of introduction, shall we? Let's go with Natalie first.
Hey, Alan, thanks for having me today. Hi, everybody. I'm Natalie Brown, and I run the Marketing and Creative Services Group over here at Surlet Hub. We are a kitchenware retailer, but we also offer cooking classes, and in the last year have pivoted, and our cooking classes now come to you virtually as well. So geography doesn't matter anymore.
Outstanding. Jacob.
Hi, I'm Jacob Rokeach, and I'm the VP of e-commerce and direct-to-consumer at the Collected Group. We are the three fashion brands, Joie, Equipment, and Kern Elliott, and excited to be here.
All right, nice having you. Thanks for joining us today. And Katie.
Hi, guys. I'm Katie Hunt. I'm the co-founder and Chief Innovations Officer for Showfields. We call ourselves the most interesting store in the world, with locations in New York and Miami, and Tokyo opening this October.
Fantastic. I love that kitchen tile. Sorry, I forgot to mention that before the call. I just really do. It looks so good. All right, so let's start in the same order here. I want to ask everyone, how do you define experiential commerce or e-commerce? What does it mean to you? Natalie, let's start getting your thoughts on this.
Yeah, to me, experiential e-commerce means meeting your consumer where they are and then connecting through your why. So for Surlet Hub, our brand positioning is make more, gather often. And this means that it's more than just a piece of cookware or taking a cooking class. It's that daily act of preparing something, which is really an act of love. It's an act of giving. It's giving of yourself. And when you start at that point, it opens the door to a bigger conversation, because it's about sharing, and it's about caring, and it's about spending time and interacting with those around you. And then that becomes the gateway to maybe taking a class to learn something new, or buying a tool to make that dish. But it all starts with that selfless daily act of making something and sharing it with those around you.
Outstanding. Jacob, let me let you get in on this.
Yeah, well, after listening to Raj, and I've already asked for a copy of the book, so I have to read the book, because I think, the Digitalseeker is interesting, and I think I've always thought about it as really focusing on the customer experience, and so when both on the e-commerce and retail side. So in a former company I was at Anita Bing, and now at TCG, really think about meeting the customer, like Nani said, where they are and at the touch point that they want to be, but also serving up the best experience for them. And I think Raj, you speak about an organizational shift, and that people actually need to embrace it. And if one person or one team is trying to fight the charge, the whole organization really has to get behind that. And I think we did that at Anita Bing, and working on and implementing some of that here. We hired someone at Anita Bing who was managing customer experience end to end. They were really thinking about that full experience from when they came to the site all the way through to their post-purchase experience, and then how does that tie into retail. And so I think meeting that customer where they are at those different touch points, and serving up that best experience is what we need to do. And there's so much choice right now. So,
all right. And Katie, you have a very interesting perspective on this. So I'm going to let you stretch out on this question, since there's a lot to cover here. So go for it.
Well, I was fortunate enough to start my career as the third employee of Warby Parker. So I really got to see from the ground up how an e-commerce company really reimagined a sector of the business through the eyes of the consumer and in service of the consumer. So when I went out with my co-founders to start Showfields 12 years later, we really dove in directly from the consumer perspective, and we started to talk about what the department store now was. And it had become this business that was just geared towards the business and not towards the consumer. And so it was starting to die off. And there was no way within the business model itself to really innovate it, because if you think about it, at any given time, for the bottom line of a department store, 90% of the inventory in the space has to be de-risked inventory, which is incredibly challenging if you're trying to innovate. So what we did is we built a technology platform that would enable any brand anywhere in the world to open a physical store at one of our locations in the same way that they would open, run, and understand a website. And then on the consumer side, we we reimagined the complete journey. From the moment they walk into the space, to the things they feel, touch, experience, to the fact that, hey, it's way more fun to ride a slide from the 3rd floor to the 2nd floor than it is to take the stairs. And then we curate all the most interesting brands from all around the world and all of these incredible artists from all around the world. And every 6 months, we tell an immersive story that goes through all 14,000 square feet of both of our flagships. And then 6 months later, we close the curtains for 4 days and we reopen with an entirely new story, new store, new artists, new brands. But what I think about is that these incredible creators who've built these amazing brands and have started these incredible e-commerce businesses, they don't want a traditional store. They don't want their things lined up on a shelf and their story not told. And so coming at it from the space of being in e-commerce for my career leading up to being in physical, I think about the e-commerce experience, everything from the convenience of it, to the ability to really curate what you're looking at, to being able to understand in real time the content behind that brand. And that's what Showfields is.
That's pretty cool. Now, you guys have been doing some pretty interesting things. We were talking about it. I saw one example where this is more kind of a standard thing, but online when you have your product videos or your discussions, all the products that are being talked about are easily shopped on the other side. That's good. That's just nice. It's easy. It's clean. But you guys kind of go the distance. I mean, it's one thing to put a slide, but I think your latest one kind of amused me, and I wasn't going to steal your thunder on that one. What did you do in your stores recently?
Yeah, this was a really fun one. So we're seeing a trend towards roller skates, which is crazy, and you got to see all of the new kind of outdoor adventures that people are partaking in a world where a lot of things are shut down. And so we ended up partnering with Moonlight Roller, which is a roller skating company out of Australia, and we actually built a roller skating rink on the 3rd floor of our store. And so as you came into the building and rode up the elevator, which is gold and crazy, and there's mirrors and flashing lights, the door would then open and you would be in the middle of a 1960s roller skating rink. But of course, for us, it's not about the flash, because that's not what the customer is looking. The customer is looking for connection and meaning right now. And so we actually paired that with the African American Roller Skating Museum and did all of these different talks about how, roller skating is actually fundamentally linked to the civil rights movement in the 1960s. So it's always about mixing something fun and amazing and entertaining with actual content and mission, because that's what our consumers really get excited about.
Okay, because I can see the cogs turning in Natalie's mind right now. She's thinking to herself, in all my store locations, we can just rip everything out, and we'll use like saute pans as
I don't think you want to roller skate with knives. Like, that is not a good thing. But I am curious though, Katie, where do you get these ideas from? Because who would have thought about turning the 3rd floor of your store into a roller skating rink? I think it's amazing. But where is the inspiration? What is the source?
So it's twofold, right? I mean, we are a data-driven company. If you think about even the data collection within the ecosystem of Showfields and the fact that we built our own point of sale, so we are tracking the customer journey, what they're picking up, what they're interested in, but we're also tracking all the direct-to-consumer companies out there in order to kind of curate what's cool, what's new, what's next. And so when we take all of that data and then we match it with the data of the neighborhood, of who's actually walking by the space, and then we take trend data and report data around what is meaningful right now. We're constantly polling our consumers, asking them what they want to see, making them the ultimate curator. And then I have a creative director who then just takes it one step farther than that, which is amazing. I think it's one thing to be like, I want to see mission driven, I want to see outdoor sports, and then my creative director is like, great, we'll build a roller skating rink in the store. And I'm like, I love it. Yes. But at the heart of every decision we are making, it is data. It is not just, pulling it out of thin air. And that data is directly from our consumer. It's not from our team.
It is interesting to me, though, because we have started to lean into trend data as well a lot more. I think there's a lot that you can glean from looking at the direction. And it's more than just, the colors. It's really about how people are going to live. We're looking at what is the emotion and the sense and the mindset, and trying to draw on that, and then reinterpret that through the way that we come to the consumer with storytelling, and then present the food we're making and the products we're cooking in, and tie it all together in this experience that matches the season as well as the mindset of where we think the customer is going to be at that point in time.
Yeah, I think it's when we were talking yesterday, I just thought it was so interesting when you guys started diving into, like, we were moving from the what, which is, this is the new Digitalseeker, this is experiential commerce, this is where things are going. And Katie, by the way, you mentioned an MIT study that was interesting. That was from March of 2018. And they were talking about how one isn't going to kill the other. They're going to blend into each other, which, is absolutely interesting. So yes, I liked your MIT study reference back there.
I'm going to say that was Jacob. He was the one who brought up the MIT.
Was it Jacob? Am I falsely?
I'm going to give Jacob full credit on that one.
I think we got there.
MIT studies left, right, and center yesterday.
I think we got there together.
Okay, so it was a group effort. All right.
I want to jump in here and add one more thing to that conversation, because it got me thinking. It's about multiple touch points and how that sort of really pushes the consumer to that purchase, or that moment of deciding they want to engage with your brand and do a transaction with your company. And it led me to thinking of the importance of go-to-market planning, and really how you have to have something that is really buttoned up and holistic. And you have to look at everything, and not just your commerce channels. You have to pull in the social media, where you may not be doing that much commerce, but you're doing storytelling, and you really have to have a holistic view of it, because otherwise things can really go horribly askew. So I think that's just one, piece that I want to share with the people watching today, is really make sure you're doing your homework on the planning front, because without that, you don't have a cohesive presentation.
Yeah, I think we were talking a lot yesterday. I think that's a really good point, and we were talking about how you tie it all together, and then also like what are the tools, and like what's the data that you need in order to enable you to do those things. I think that's where I think a lot of commerce companies, and whether you're a retailer or brick and mortar first and then went digital, or you are a digital first company that's going into retail, like really figuring out how to bridge that gap. And I think that's some of the things that I've been working on in my career, is like, how do you actually tie those consumers together? It's not easy when a customer is purchasing in a store. How do you take that customer's interest from e-commerce or from their online experience and give that to a store associate so they can give them a guided experience in the store? So how do you, let's say, a wish list is one really good example. Can a customer go on to a retailer and make a wish list, and then a store associate, as they walk in, can ask for their name and say, oh, I see you really liked a size 27 pair of denim. We have something in that you'd like in a very similar color wash, but we'll give you a t-shirt that matches perfect with that. And be able to give that guided experience is sort of what we've been talking about. And I think data and tools to help enable that have been, I think, popping up a lot. And I know that Raj probably has some things to say about that.
I just was going to bring him back on. I see him nodding there going, I got something to say. Bring me back on.
Yeah, no,
Raj, it's all you.
It's been a great conversation, and love this intersection of experiential on one side and data-driven on the other side. And, I think on the data side, we work with so many people that struggle with these big data problems. And often, what I share with people is, so much time is spent on what data you're collecting. Not enough time is spent on what you're actually doing with the data in a practical way. Because you can collect an unlimited amount of data at this point. There's so much data available on consumers and on their votes and on their non-votes as well. But then what do you actually do with it? And very often it just sits there in these data lakes or in these big data warehouses, and they don't get to the end practitioner. And so, what I've seen really work for people is start very clearly actually with what you plan to do with the data. Do you plan to redesign the site? Do you plan to optimize the creative? Do you plan to change the merchandise? What is the decision point? Who's making the decision? Put the data in the hands of that practitioner, and then work backward to what you collect. Because otherwise you're in these 2 or 3 year single view of customer projects that take forever, and you don't get any value out of the data for a very long time, and nobody has time for that.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Katie, you were talking about that. Oh, well, I think the
no, do it.
Katie, it was really interesting when you guys talking about your magic wand, and I think that's I think one thing that maybe not struggle, but how do you take that retail experience and bring it onto the digital and collect data? I think you guys were talking about like a great way to collect data with that magic wand. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, because I mean, the thing that keeps me up at night every night is around like the full consumer journey, right? It's this idea that someone has potentially had a touch point with the brand that they're going to meet in the store, or they're going to have multiple touch points with the brand post leaving our store. I mean, we've worked with over 450 brands at this point. Everybody's coming in, meeting and discovering these things, and then going about their life and adding these things to their life at different points. So for us, instead of leaving that customer to, leave post show fields, maybe not purchasing something, and then have to go to Google and be like, cool toothbrush company that was like easy to travel with. Like, we created something called the Magic Wand. The Magic Wand allows, and is completely designed for the consumer, allows someone to put their phone away during the experience and like literally do Instagram in real life. They can tap things that they like. By tapping them, they pull up more information about them. By tapping it, they can have a sales associate come over. They can add it to a digital wish list, but all with an actual just wand in their hand and their phone away. And then at the end of their experience, they can just easily slide those things from the wish list over. If they'd like to purchase them, we hand them the bag with those items, or they can keep the wish list and shop it later. But what it allows us to understand is not only what they met in the store, but what they ended up eventually purchasing. And attribution, as we all know, is one of the most challenging things to actually, nail down.
Yeah, awesome. We're starting to get some questions in from the audience. And Raj, this one is for you. It's from Brad Epstein. In your research, did you come across companies that transition to serving the seekers? Can it only happen from the top down, or are there other change agents that can make it happen?
Yeah, well, the book opens with the story of Cedar Fair, which is a 50 or 100-year-old business that is in the amusement park business, right? Sort of Great America and other such amusement parks. And so, I would say the first version of their digital experience was literally a brochure of here's all the rides we have at the park. And that was what it was. You fast forward to what it is today, and it's really you can't tell the difference between the digital experience and the park. It's all the rides, it's all the safety, it's ordering food, it's the loyalty program, it's all intermingled together. And so I think that's a great transition. And what I love about the story is the story wasn't purely top down. It was the digital team, the e-commerce team, that gradually kept deeply understanding the motivations of their customers, getting to the heart of, hey, they're just looking for a fun day for the family, and then built the digital experience around the physical park. And got there, and it's very much like the story of commingling cooking classes with utensils, or the story of reinventing the store the way Katie was talking about. So these stories are permeating I think everywhere, and I think it can absolutely be done from the bottom up.
Jacob, oh sorry.
No, go for it.
Jacob, how do you kind of think about it in the fashion world? I know it's potentially one of the more, challenging verticals in which to really be innovative on the e-commerce side. How are you guys kind of approaching that?
Yeah, so I think I think omnichannel's been important for us, and that's both from a data perspective, customer experience perspective, but also what are the different touch points. And so like we were, like Natalie was saying, is meeting the customer where they want to be met with what they want to be met. And I think there's things that we do in stores, let's say at Anina Bing, that we can't really do on e-commerce. So like jewelry trunk shows work really well, or we actually had exclusive products for specific cities. So we had 15 retail stores, and we'd actually created products that were only available in those stores that spoke to that city. So like we had a Los Angeles sweatshirt or a New York sweatshirt, and you could only get them in those stores. You couldn't actually get them online. So I thought that was something unique that we're doing on the fashion side. I think again, like experience and having that the payout equal the promise is also really important. So because it's so commoditized on the e-commerce side, like I'd say like brand loyalists are probably not as prevalent as they were before, because you can spend your money and share a wallet anywhere. And so making sure that your payoff always equals the promise. So it's from the point that they reach your site with personalization and recommendations based off of where they are physically or what they've looked at before, all the way through to like the checkout experience and post-purchase flow. I think that's been really important. And then the last thing we did was we created a digital, actually online concierge and stylist program. So we were allowing people to have that same in-store experience, but virtually, which was great. We did that before COVID happened, and it was great when COVID happened because our stores closed. But we created an online stylist program where we'd have a stylist from working with e-commerce customers, VIPs, or anybody who wanted to be involved who couldn't physically go into a store, but they could get styled. So I think there's some of those things that you can do, or monogramming was another thing. Like what can you do in stores that you don't get on a retail experience or an e-com experience? So trying to create that value for a customer.
Mm-hmm. Natalie, any thoughts on that from your perspective?
I think for us, we definitely try to create, especially when it comes to the cooking classes, we try to create a bigger sort of ecosystem. So, when you're taking an online cooking class in particular, because you're not going to come into the store, so you're not going to have that immersive moment. So we do try and use other vehicles like email to do a pre-purchase funnel and try and make sure that you have everything you need for the class. So it's not quite as immersive where we have, a concierge who can help you, but we send you the recipe packet and we send you a list of the tools and utensils you're going to need, along possibly with a coupon, so that you can shop ahead of time and make sure you have everything you need. Obviously, when you're coming into the store, we have all the goodies there. And the part that I love about the cooking classes in particular from an experiential standpoint is because we work with so many vendors, we have all of the products that we sell in the cooking classes. So you can come in and, try that scan pan skillet that you may have had your eye on, and now you see just how beautifully it cooks. And so then the day of the class, it's easy to pick one up and take it home with you. So I think for us, it's about trying to bridge that gap and knowing that you're not in our physical location, in our actual cooking school, using these amazing products, but setting you up with the information. And is it taking you to the site? We do enhanced PDP. So there's more information there about these key products. So you can try and immerse yourself in the product through the site and get an understanding of what it would feel like to use these tools or cooking these utensils, and then give you the opportunity to buy them ahead of your class, or even after your class. We do post-class follow-ups as well. So definitely, I think there's a challenge there in trying to bridge that gap a bit when you're doing virtual experiences. But by, I think, providing information and reviews and testimonials and things like that, you can actually help the customer kind of wrap their head around what the products are and help get them there in lieu of being able to use them in real life, so to speak.
Natalie, I was going to say one thing I really love about the experience that you guys have done is how knowledgeable a lot of the staff are. And I think that's one experience that I think is so important, because you don't always get that. You could tell whether I think you really see people that are so passionate about it. I bought a knife. I wouldn't say I'm a chef, but I cook a fair amount. And I bought a nice chef's knife, which is, as you guys know, if you don't know, they can be very expensive. And the guy who was selling me the knife, he was so knowledgeable. I left with a great purchase, and I felt really confident about it. And I can also go back and get it sharpened whenever I want. But I felt like that was such a great experience. Also, like buying a gift for somebody, I went in to buy a gift, and they really helped me, because I'm maybe not great at buying wedding gifts, but I walked out with a great gift, and I thought it was just like the staff was great, and it made that experience so good.
Well, and I think that you raised an interesting point, actually, and I'm just sort of thinking now that because we are focused on the experience, it's about helping someone, right? It's really enabling them. It's not just buying a knife. It's like, what is the right knife for you? And as you know, there are a few choices. It's sort of a decision tree, right? But by setting up our stores and our brand and our business to be a space where it's about that one-on-one experience and helping somebody, I think you attract talent. So we tend to attract people who are passionate about the space as well and can actually fulfill. You were talking, Jake, about fulfilling the promise, right? And so it becomes a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. If you build the business model, it attracts the people who are drawn to that, and then you can help, service the consumer.
Natalie, you're talking about the cooking classes and the utensils, and Jacob, you were saying stylists and then the apparel. So in many ways, you guys are sort of services and product companies, in terms of what you deliver. How do you think about the services part of the business? Is it a loss leader to sell product, or is it part of marketing, or how do you think about the services, the stylists and the cooking classes?
Yeah, I can go really quickly. We look at it, and then I think yours is probably a longer answer. Is we looked at it as as an offer for our customers, where probably bringing in some incremental revenue, but really servicing in our existing customer base. Like we're almost like a retention play. Like how can we continue to make it a sticky, or give someone that experience? Because if they can't get it, right? If someone really wants a retail experience but can't get it because they live in, Park City, Utah, or Salt Lake City, where I'm from. Like, we don't have an Anina Bing store there. We don't have a collected any of the Joie stores there. But if you really wanted that in-store experience, how could you get that? So, I'm not sure I totally answered your question, but maybe not a loss leader, but definitely a little bit more of like a retention play, like a loyalty program in a way. Natalie, you might have a longer answer. You guys have built this out much bigger than we have.
For us, the cooking schools are definitely not a service. They're integral to the brand. They're a standalone line of business. And so a very important part of our business. And also, I think one of the things that really sets us apart in the space, if I had to think about a service, I think about things like Jacob mentioned, knife sharpening. That's a service. And it's a great way to bring people back into the store to come and explore. Another service, related to knives and cookware, we do the try it before you buy it, so you can actually sit there and chop, or stand there and chop carrots before you choose the knife to feel which knife is right for you. Or we sometimes have displays with 3 types of skillets, and you can try the 3 non-sticks and see which one you prefer, and maybe saute some onions. So to me, those are the services, and the cooking school is actually part of our core business. And I think then when it comes to how you bring this to life in the digital world, we're still figuring out and experimenting. But one of the things we started doing was adding a discover section to our site, where we can bring new products in and build an immersive page if we launch something new. And again, it's that sort of, how do you try and replicate that in-store experience on a digital space or digital environment. And so that's how we sort of try and tie the two together.
So we're getting close to the top of the hour. One of the questions we always seem to get asked by our audience is, how do you measure all of this? And I know we had the panel had some thoughts on this. Katie, you had some ways that you measure success in this kind of experiential realm. What are your thoughts there?
For me, it's dwell time. It used to be, sales were black and white. Did they buy the product? Did they not buy the product? For me, it's how long did they stand in that space, explore that product, learn about that story. If they're using the magic wand, how many questions did they want answered? How much of the story did they want to listen to? And I think that's the new sale, right? If you've bought that customer in, it's not just for them purchasing the product. It's about them walking out and being like, have you heard about this new brand, Nuria? It's completely sustainable packaging and female founded, and it was really cool. That's how, NPS actually happens. It's by really understanding and falling in love with that brand.
Yep. Natalie, Jacob, any thoughts on your end? Raj, I'm definitely going to get to you.
I mean, we still obviously look at sales. For us, it's about fill rate on classes, how many people book a class and then actually show up and come and take the class. So we look at some of the conventional stuff, but definitely I also do some of the softer measuring as well. Lots of social listening. What are people talking about in our space and in relation to our brand, to try and understand sort of that bigger picture.
Yep. Raj?
Yeah, one of the things I think is most important to make these kinds of transformations towards experiential is to orient towards lifetime value of customer. I think it's almost impossible to invest, given the cost of marketing and the cost of acquisition, if you don't have an accurate view of lifetime value of customer and invest upfront, against that, and then nurture and cause that to grow. So every investment, I think, ultimately comes down to LTV.
We get
that's how we do it. And we've been looking at, doesn't matter where your purchase happens, if a customer is coming back and purchasing multiple times through different touch points, and we look at them separately, but also, where that engagement is happening and trying to understand that flow. I think we talked about the overlap between our retail customers and our e-commerce customers of people that we have an email address. We were seeing like a 60 to 70% overlap of people who shop in retail were also shopping in e-commerce, which totally makes sense. If you're shopping in a retail store, most likely you're also going to the e-commerce. But it just proves that MIT study that we were talking about, which is those touch points are going to create, more, better lifetime value for that customer over time.
Absolutely. Any last thoughts from the panel as we hit the top of the hour? Any recommendations for the folks listening in and thinking about, well, gee, what's my next step? What's the first thing I should be looking at if I'm trying to either make my physical stores or my online presence much more experiential? Katie, I thought your suggestion of the way you think about a story, and I know you're in a unique position, but I just think it's a brilliant way of thinking about it, and even if that could be brought down to a smaller level. Like maybe it's Natalie does as a story about this type of food, and then you kind of run and riff with that. But Katie, any thoughts any last thoughts or the things you want to share with our audience?
I think it's about storytelling and creating the story that you want from beginning, middle to end, and then building the pieces around that. And if you can accomplish that for your consumer, it is a lovely, seamless experience for them. And at the end of the day, that's what you want.
Excellent. Natalie, any last thoughts?
Yeah, for me, it's about really understanding your why, because unless you understand that, you're not going to be able to figure out who your seekers are and what you need to bring to them to connect with them and engage in that bigger conversation.
All right, Jacob, I know you're ripping out a bunch of your stores and putting in, roller discos and paintball. I'm certain that'll work really well. Any last thoughts from you? Sorry. I just had this vision of paintball at the collected.
Sure. You said paintball, and I was like, huh.
You're sitting here going,
Yeah, I think we talked about listening and understanding where the seeker is going, but also that listening to that customer. And I think that's been one thing as like the organizational shift. So maybe you're hiring somebody that's all they're thinking about is what that customer's looking for. And I thought Natalie actually brought up a really good point, which is planning. And I think that's also what we probably get caught up in as like e-commerce leaders or omnichannel leaders or our CEOs, just planning enough in advance where your content and your creative and your storytelling actually matches your products and your production timelines and all of that. It's like we have an integrated marketing calendar, which I think does a lot of that for us. I'd love to see Natalie's, maybe could help us out a little bit, but I think that's been like paramount in trying to figure all this out and put the pieces together.
Outstanding. Raj, you started this.
Well, certainly
you get to finish it.
It's certainly building the business for the seeker. But as the data guy, in this panel, I'll say, don't lose sight of the gut in making these calls. And, to use a line from a friend of mine, you can't compute an ROI on everything, because what's the ROI on your mom? So I'll leave it at that.
I'm going to use that with my CFO.
If he answers.
What Raj said.
All righty. With that, thank you all so much. Wonderful having you all here. I want to thank Natalie, Katie, Jacob, Raj, and Sucharita. All of you guys have been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today. With that, we're going to remind you that next week is Pride Month webinar. It's LGBTQ plus issues in e-commerce in the workspace. That's going to be led by Kate Delhagen. You have a great panel there. That's going to be a very interesting session. I want to thank Bloomreach for sponsoring today. Don't forget, you can get a copy of that book by writing the Digitalseeker at bloomreach.com. They'll get a book out to you right away. And finally, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Really appreciate having you, and we will see you next week. Take care, everyone.